Going into this morning's oral argument, Moore v. Harper, it didn't really seem like free and fair democratic elections had much of a future in this country. If one were so inclined, the smart money said the Supreme Court would functionally cancel democratic elections, or to be more technical, cancel any check on gerrymandered state legislators from erasing elections if they wanted to. That might still happen, but if you took the over on the American Republic, things are looking up. And this is from Above the Law. Across hours of oral argument, Justice Jackson asked the most succinct and ultimately damning question that might save the day, or at least minimize the impact. As a refresher, Moore v. Harper is the hook for the court to enshrine the independent state legislator theory, a sort of conservative fever dream contending that when the U.S. Constitution vests state legislators with power over elections, it elevates them above their own state constitutions and consequently divorces the state legislator from any checks or balances involving the executive or judiciary. When the Constitution says that states, by the legislator thereof, set the rules for electing a state's congressional delegation and name presidential electors, as the legislator therefore may direct, it means state representatives and state senators are not subject to state oversight. This is like, again, it should be noted that the state independent legislator theory, whatever, is legally illiterate. The idea that the Constitution saying, hey, these people are responsible for this thing, therefore means that no other checks exist on that behavior is completely incoherent and not even remotely in line with how law works. Any ruling in favor of the independent state legislator doctrine, which up until this point was completely discredited, even with the conservative, any vote in favor of this should be interpreted as a coup attempt, an effort to subvert the Constitution, and should be seen as an invalidator for the mental validity of the justice who voted in its favor. It is completely indefensible. Assuming we don't live in the worst timeline, if more isn't approved, what does that give us? Time. As the argument unfolded, three distinct camps emerged, with Jackson, Kagan, and Sotomayor opposed the whole goofy theory, Alito, Gorsuch, and Thomas thrilling at the prospect of authoritarian rule, and the Chief Barrett and Kavanaugh wishing there was some way to let Republicans gerrymander at will without turning North Carolina elections into North Korean elections. I like this write-up. Neil Katyal went right at the conservatives with receipts, straight up calling a shot, announcing he'd been waiting for this case so we could unload his can of originalism on Justice Thomas, quoting back their own opinions from every time the shoe was on the other foot, prompting a series of blubbering exchanges from the frustrated justices. His exchange with Gorsuch set the tone. The justice asked Katyal for one example of the court employing Katyal's theory. He cited a 19th century example. Grumble put that aside. He cited another. Gorsuch rants and raves trying to figure out why he hadn't researched this point. This is a very partisan write-up. Not that I mind. Reality is partisan. Alito concocted a hypothetical about a rogue state Supreme Court that needed to be brought back to heel. Yes, Alito raised the fear that a court might ignore law and precedent for political gain. You really can't make this stuff up. Alito's having himself an all-timer week for unintentional comedy. Regardless, Alito's hypothetical was both irreverent, everyone seemed on board with some very deferential standard for federal justice review, and missed the whole point. The framers of both the federal and various state constitutions began from the premise that checks and balances are the antidote to rogue actors. I guess I don't understand how you can cut the state constitution out of the equation when it is giving the state legislator authority to exercise the legislative power. She actually asked this question in different phrasing a few times, but it's really the only question anyone needs to answer. If state constitutions create state legislators, then how can state legislators violate state constitutions? It ceases to be a constitutionally ordained legislator at that point. It's a chicken and egg problem, except it's more like which came first, the chicken or my dinner tonight, with an obvious single answer. If the state constitution sets guardrails of voting rights and the proper deference required to court and the executive, then the legislator can only work within that. The GOP argued that because the word legislator is in the U.S. Constitution, it elevates state legislators above the constraints of their own state laws for this purpose, but no one, original or otherwise, ever entertained that idea. That's retarded. Okay, here's how it works. Oh, gotcha, Mooch. I love you. Here's how it works for those of you who don't know, okay? This is a very, 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 very basic summary of U.S. Federalism. Okay. So basically, the highest law of the land, all right? Are you ready for it? Is the goddamn motherfucking Constitution. Oh, wait. Is that how it is? Hold on. There it is. Wait, I got to do the thingy. There we go. Okay. And then it's like the wa. Okay, it's like that, okay? That's it, that's the Constitution, okay? And the Constitution is the supreme law of the land, all right? The Constitution holds the critical rules that determine the way in which the government functions. The president swears an oath to protect the Constitution. The soldiers of the United States swear an oath to protect the Constitution. The Constitution is the central document around which all American legal and political action takes place. It is the highest law of the land. Nothing else supersedes it. Though there's some exceptions when it comes to international. No. Okay. The Constitution. The Constitution decides, okay, in its infinite wisdom, that there are three branches of the federal government, okay? We have the executive, that's the president. We have the legislative, that's Congress. And we have the judicial, that's the Supreme Court, okay? The Supreme Court has the ability, through judicial review, though this is not specifically enumerated in the Constitution, to determine whether laws passed by these two dipshits over here match what the Constitution says. So the legislator can write a law, and then the president can sign it into law, and then the Supreme Court can have a case brought to it, and they're like, this is actually dumb and gay and unconstitutional. Nope. And then they X out the law, okay? That's how it works. Now, because America is highly federalized, we also have 50 states. See, I'm just times 50 because they're the stars on the stars and bars. We also have 50 states, right? And all of the 50 states also have this system. You have the state executive branch, that's called the governor. You have the state legislative branch. For that, you have the state senate, state house. And you have the state judiciary. That is the state Supreme Court. All of these systems. 150 states. Okay, fine. Times. Oh God, paint. Times 16.6. Repeating. There. Thank you. All of these systems repeat for the states. Okay. Now, the Constitution up here has rules set for how the state should govern themselves, but it doesn't lay out all the rules, okay? It doesn't figure everything out for the states. So the states also produce their own state constitution. Blah. The state constitution is below the main constitution, but it's still above these fucking guys because it's the Constitution, all right? So, shut up, Doctor Strange. So basically, the argument is thus, all right? If the state constitution is the document that lays out the rules for how the state is governed, and the state Supreme Court is the institution that determines the constitutionality of state rules as applied to the state constitution, then how exactly could the elector maps produced by the legislator, which is the institution the federal constitution gives the power to determine the rules for federal elections within that state, how exactly could this legislator operate free of judiciary oversight? Right? Like, if the legislator only exists at the behest of the state constitution, and the state judiciary is the institution that checks whether or not stuff abides by the rules of the state constitution, then how can the legislator pass elector maps and gerrymander without oversight from the state constitution? The argument from independent state... What the fuck? Shut up. The argument from independent state legislator types is that somehow, and this makes no sense, by the way, somehow, because the Constitution specifically writes out that state legislators get to decide this, that means that the state legislator is empowered in this behavior above its own constitution. that somehow this one part of its job elevates it all the way to where the only thing that can regulate its behavior is the Constitution itself, which has no specific rules on the way in which these elections are conducted at a state level. You might notice that this doesn't apply to literally anything else. Like nothing, like this doesn't make any sense, like zero sense. Like, so because the Constitution specifically names this right, it means that this right gets to supersede all the checks and balances we otherwise constructed in the Federalist system. You could overwrite your own state constitution with an entity that only exists at the behest of the state constitution. How the fuck does that make sense? It's definitely a loophole. It's not a loophole. A loophole would imply that there's some kind of like tricky legal thread you could pull here. This isn't that. It's just lying. This is just lie. It's just deliberately interpreting the Constitution in bad faith. The point of being a Supreme Court justice is that you get to interpret our incredibly vague and malleable document, which is great, by the way. Well, loopholes are bad faith? I don't think loopholes are inherently bad faith, but this is extremely bad faith. This is an incorrect read of the Constitution. I firmly believe this. Yeah, this would essentially be like saying, yeah, no, good argument. Yeah, like it's like when the SCOTUS went bribery is freedom of speech. It would be like saying that because the Bill of Rights, the First Amendment protects freedom of speech, that would mean that any law passed by a state legislator, which entails the speaking of free speech, is not subject to any regulation from its state constitution and goes all the way up to the main constitution, no matter what it is, like say death threats. So that the legislator could pass a law saying like, it's legal to make death threats against someone now. Also libel and defamation are legal now. And then it would supersede and go all the way up here. It would be, it's difficult to even describe the degree of bullshit legalese necessary to even pretend that this is a valid legal theory. Well, we'll see how it goes.